So unfortunately, Miss Carroll's running a little bit late this evening, so I'm going to start off and chair the meeting for now. Sorry if I'm a little rusty, but we're going to do some quick introductions. So first of all, thank you all for coming tonight, showing up. For everyone on Zoom, welcome. So every member, I just want you all, maybe from Scott over to Tom, just to introduce ourselves, our names, and yeah, just kind of welcome in a whole new board of members. Yeah. Okay.
Scott Richmond.
Jeff Vickers.
Will Greer.
Lindsay Brilliant.
Vicki Lamprin.
Kate Cost.
Okay. And Tom Haley, our select board liaison. I forgot, I'm the one that introduces you. I'm not used to being Kelly, so okay. So next we have our town vision statement, and is there any member that would like to read that off real quick? I have it for whoever would. Perfect, thank you, Vicki.
Town vision statement. Bennington is a welcoming, engaged, inclusive, and resilient community where everyone, regardless of identity, shares in our vitality and benefits from an outstanding quality of life.
Thank you, Vicki. Okay, so next we have the consent of agenda. Tom, do I need a motion for that? Yep, okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
I make a motion.
Okay, Jeff motions.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, hearing no discussion, can I have a vote on the motion to approve the agenda?
Aye.
Okay, all, okay. Okay, the agenda is approved as presented. Okay, next we have the approval of previous agenda's minutes. So these are from August. We will not have September minutes since the last meeting was unofficial. We did not have a quorum then because our new members were not officially on with us. So I will take a motion to accept minutes from the August 17th meeting as presented.
I make a motion we accept the minutes.
Okay, and do I hear a second?
Second that as well.
Okay. Okay, any discussion on that? Okay. Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion we approve the minutes.
Okay. Okay, I think it's Jeff and Scott tonight. They're for the win. Okay. Anyone else want to? Oh, you're going to second it too? Okay.
We'll keep it consistent.
Okay.
Aye.
Oh, that's true. You know, I didn't even think about that. No, you see, you guys know your Robert's Rules of Order. Okay. So next we have public comment. I'm not sure if anyone signed up on the list up there on front, but if anyone from the public would like to come forward and speak, you're more than happy to have 3 minutes. Did anyone sign up? No? Okay. Would anyone like to come up or no? 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 Okay. Okay, well then I guess with that we can, unless there's any other business from the board, I think we can jump into the town survey update from Jonah Spivak. Would you like to come up?
Hi everyone, I'm Jonah Spivak. I'm the communications coordinator for the town of Bennington. It's good to see you all, and thank you very much for having me come today. And basically I just wanted to alert you and the community to the Bennington 2023 Community Survey, which is now out. And it's an important opportunity for people in the town to be able to reflect and give back their feedback to the town in terms of what sort of services they would like to see improved or changed or different, as well as their ideas and thoughts for things that we could be doing in the future. We use this information quite a lot. It's active for about once the survey is completed, which will be in 3 weeks, we use that information for about 2 years until the next survey comes out, which we are now doing every couple of years. This will be the 4th survey that we've done, and each time we do a new survey, it actually gives us a little more information because we also have the benefit of prior surveys to compare it to, so you will be able to see trends emerging. So I do encourage people to fill out a survey. It's available online at the town's website. If you just go to benningtonvt.org, the first thing you'll see is a pop-up for that survey. Alternatively, if you would like a printed copy of the survey, you can find that at the town offices. You can also find it at the Senior Center, the Recreation Center, and the Bennington Free Library. Alternatively, you can call the town office at 442-1037, and we will mail you a copy of the survey. So we very much hope as many of you as possible will fill out the survey and let us know what you think. And thank you very much for your time. The survey takes, on average, 9 minutes or less to complete. Thank you. Yeah.
So it closes in about 3 weeks?
That's correct. It closes on November 8th.
November 8th. And
Yeah.
then how long does it take until the results are compiled?
Generally, we will present it at the Select Board meeting right after it's completed, or the one after that. So within 1 or 2 Select Board meetings, depending on how quickly we can tabulate the results. But we'd like to get that information out as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Did you, Jonah, did you email that out to the board members? I got one in my Assistant Chief Fire Department email, but I didn't get one on the CPARB email.
I did not email it to the CPARB group, so I will go ahead and do that. So thank you for that suggestion. That's excellent. Yeah. And I would take any other suggestions, places where I could send it as well. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
And Jonah, it's completely anonymous, correct? So folks,
That's correct. And any data that we do share is anonymized, so you can feel secure that any opinions or suggestions you make will be completely anonymous. That's a very good point. Thank you for asking that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Will, for this time.
Okay, thank you so much, Jonah.
Thanks, Jonah.
Yeah. And thank you, board members, for asking questions. Okay. Next, we have on the agenda the CPARB training open meeting law, and we have with us tonight Meryl Bent, who is the Town of Bennington's attorney. Thank you so much for coming tonight to present to us. I will hand it off to you for the next hour or however long you need.
Hopefully not that long.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Meryl Bent. I'm from the law firm of Wilmington, Campbell, Bent, and Stasny in Manchester, and we serve as the Town of Bennington's legal counsel. And I'm going to go over Vermont's open meeting law because it is applicable to all public bodies, including CPARB, and it's important that everybody understand what their obligations are and what it entails. So I'm just going to go through and explain the statute and answer any questions that might come up from the board members. So, first, a summary, and these are all the topics that I'm going to cover in this presentation. So, just in general, Vermont's open meeting law is designed to ensure that the public has the ability to look in and see what the government is doing, and to support the notion that government is supposed to be open and available to the public. So the open meeting law in Vermont is one of the pieces of legislation that does that, and it requires all meetings of public bodies to be open to the public unless a specific exception applies. So in order to make a meeting open to the public body must provide advance public notice of meetings, and I'll go over the different types of notices that are required. That must include the meeting agenda. And that is because you want to give the public notice of what you're actually going to be talking about, because how else will they know if they care to be present for that particular conversation? It should be fairly clear what the discussion is on the agenda from the description, so that people have a sense of things they're interested in and they don't miss them. Public bodies must also discuss all business and take all actions in an open meeting unless an exception applies. They must allow members of the public to attend and to participate. That's why we have public comment at the beginning or sometimes at the end of public meetings to allow members of the public to come in. That's also why members of the public may request to be on the agenda if they have something that will take longer than the public comment period allows. And then the public body must also take meeting minutes and make them available to the public. So that way, if you miss the meeting, you can still find out what happened and stay in the know. So this is the statutory definition of public body. And it is very broad, and for good reason. You want to have it cover anything that is going to be making any sort of decision or serving in an advisory capacity for either a state agency or an instrumentality of the state. And municipalities are instrumentalities of the state, which is why open meeting law applies to them. So it means any board, council, or commission of the state or one or more of its political subdivisions. Any board, council, or commission of any agency, authority, or instrumentality of the state or one or more of its political subdivisions, or any committee of any of the foregoing boards, councils, or commissions. Except that public bodies do not include councils or similar groups established by the governor for the sole purpose of advising the governor with respect to policy. Obviously, that's not applicable in this context, but just part of the overall definition. So the Town of Bennington Select Board is a board of a political subdivision of the state, that being the town, and because CPARB is a committee established by that board, it is subject to the requirements of the open meeting law. And if anybody has questions from the board and you want to stop me and ask as it's in your mind, that's fine. I don't mind being interrupted. So this is another important definition. A meeting is a gathering of a quorum of the board, of the members of a public body for the purpose of discussing the business of the public body or for the purposes of taking action. So as you can see from that definition, there are some, usually that raises questions in people's mind of, well, what if a number of board members happen to be at another town function? So first of all, if there's not a quorum of the body, it doesn't meet this definition. But second of all, if you're there for some other purpose, you're not there for the purpose of discussing the business of the public body or for the purpose of taking action. And I would say, as a general rule of thumb, if members of this body are present for another event and happen to be in a room together, best practice is avoid discussing the business of the board. As tempting as that may be, because you've got something in your mind, something just came across your desk or the meeting just ended, it's better to save it. And a quorum is a majority of the members of a public body. So it's calculated by counting the number of total positions on a board or committee, regardless of any vacancies or recusals. So another point with that is if you have a couple people who are members of this board at another public function and they're standing together talking, again, just please avoid talking about the business. Even if you don't have a quorum, it's better to avoid talking about the business of the public body, just to avoid any concern that you are engaged in something that should be an open meeting. And I'll talk about some examples of where things get a little fuzzy in a little bit. So business is the public body's governmental functions, including any matter over which the public body has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power. So if you're not talking about those things, then you should be okay. But it's really what you want to avoid doing outside the context of an open meeting that meets all the definitions and all the requirements of an open meeting is having a discussion about the matters that are within that agency's purview. So there are certain things that are which expressly do not count as business, which a really important one is administrative functions. So you can talk about scheduling a meeting, organizing an agenda, or distributing materials to discuss at the meeting, clerical work, or work assignments of staff or other personnel. How else could you all find out what days you're available to have a meeting? So that's an important exception to the open meeting law requirement. So routine day-to-day administrative matters that don't require action by the public body, so long as no money is appropriated, spent, or encumbered. I've already gone over the other functions when you've got multiple members and possibly a quorum of a public body at some other function that you all happen to be together. That's usually where problems may come up, because if members of the public see a number of you huddled in the corner, regardless of what you're talking about, that can raise questions for people. So just something to keep in mind is you want to present yourself as a member of this body in a manner that engenders public trust. And that's one of the ways we do that, by just avoiding the appearance of impropriety, even if there is no actual impropriety afoot. Same goes for meetings of a different public body. That's also a context where this arises. For example, if members have a particular interest in something on the select board's agenda and they want to attend that meeting. Site inspection is not really going to be an issue for this board, nor would be bilateral collective bargaining negotiations. So, big reminder, caveat. So if you start by having just a normal social conversation, just be careful not to stray into discussion of the business of the body at especially if a quorum is present, because then you have an open meeting law problem. I'll get into that because there are a few different issues with written communications like that. So another issue that comes up often is whether members need to be physically present for meetings. Not necessarily, but if a quorum or more of members will be participating in a meeting electronically, the meeting agenda must designate at least one physical location where a member of the public can attend and participate in the meeting, at least one member of the body or staff member or other designee who will be physically present at that location. And any member who participates in a meeting remotely must be able to hear and be heard throughout the meeting. So this underlined here, this means that participation by speakerphone or Skype or Zoom or whatever other platform you use may be appropriate, but participation by email is not appropriate. And each member who participates remotely must identify themselves when the meeting is convened, just like you do in an in-person meeting and just as you've done at the beginning of this meeting. And then any vote that's not unanimous must be taken by roll call if you have a member who is present by remote means. Okay, group emails. So sometimes you might have a quorum of board members on a group email chain to talk about something like scheduling or the agenda, really mundane administrative things that fall within that exception that we talked about earlier. But that's really important that you don't stray into any dialogue that addresses the business of the board, because you can end up having inadvertently an open meeting that is subject to all of the requirements by doing that. And so then you've got what's called an open meeting law violation, which you have to take steps to cure. So there are ways to cure it, but you just want to avoid it altogether. So be careful replying all. If you are responding strictly to an administrative inquiry or an administrative email chain, that's okay. Just make sure that you keep your response within the confines of that exception. Another big issue is something called serial communications, which is also sometimes referred to as daisy chain communications. And that's where two people may have a discussion, and then that person has a discussion with another board member, and then that person has the same discussion with another board member. And then once you've had that discussion serially with a quorum of board members, you've just triggered the open meeting law. So you want to avoid having successive interrelated private conversations. And again, that's the reason we have the general rule that you just don't talk about board business outside of an open meeting, even in casual conversation with one board member. Because if they turn around and talk to the next person and then talk to the next person, you may inadvertently cause a problem. Social media, just don't. Don't talk about board business on social media. Obviously, you can announce meetings and things like that, post an agenda on social media, but don't engage. If you see a post on, the Bennington community page, and even if it has something to do with CPARB that you know something about, just stay out of it. Don't put your name in that discussion group. It causes all sorts of issues. And again, it really undermines the public trust if people are talking about the board from a position of knowledge or a position of authority as a member on those forums. It's just not appropriate to be on those forums in that manner. And I'm sure that goes without saying, but I still should say it. So, yeah, collective editing of online documents. Of course, this is something that sometimes happens, especially with Google Docs and things like that. And this is a tricky one because you do need to be able to edit things as a group. But I've included the Secretary of State's recommendation, which is to name a point person who collects and compiles each member's comments for later discussion at a duly warned meeting. So everybody sends their comments to one person, and then you go through them as a board in open meeting, and that person, oftentimes it would be the secretary, takes down the notes of the comments, what the board has decided on, wordsmithing, editing, makes those changes, and then finalizes the document as a single person, rather than sending a Google Docs link to everyone and having everybody start writing their comments. And that can be a real problem, especially if you start doing comment bubbles and explaining your thinking. That should all be done in an open session. Okay, so I'm going to go over the notice requirements. For regular meetings, usually you would establish a recurring time and place. For example, the first Tuesday of every month, 6:00 p.m. at the firehouse, or maybe the Thursday or the last Thursday. So in the case of regular meetings, a public body usually schedules the regular meeting by adopting a resolution setting the time and place of the meeting, so that way you don't have to do it over and over again. And that information should be made available to the public upon request, and it usually is also posted on the town's calendar. So when people are curious about the meeting schedule, they can just go access the calendar. They don't have to reach out to an individual member to find out what the schedule is. And actually, I think usually Bennington also includes that information on the page about that public body. Like, this body meets on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month kind of thing. Special meetings are meetings that are not regular meetings. So if they fall outside of the regular meeting schedule, you have to give at least 24 hours notice before a special meeting and publicly announce it by giving notice of the meeting's time, place, and purpose to a newspaper or radio station serving the area, as well as to any person who has requested in writing to be notified of special meetings. That rarely is the case, but it's something to keep in mind if you ever have to convene a special meeting. And then public bodies have to give oral or written notice to each member unless a member has waived this notice. You want to give notice to your members. And then emergency meetings, probably not something you'll have to encounter very often, but an emergency meeting may be held only when necessary to respond to an unforeseen occurrence or condition requiring immediate attention. Most things don't qualify as an emergency, especially because special meetings only require 24 hours notice. So emergency meetings do not require public announcement, posting of notices, or 24-hour notice to members, so long as some public notice is given as soon as possible before the meeting. And an emergency meeting should never be used if the body is able to comply with the 24-hour notice requirements for special meetings. So one thing you absolutely could not do is convene an emergency hearing more than 24 hours after the decision to have an emergency meeting. And then same notice requirement with the agenda, at least 48 hours prior to a regular meeting and at least 24 hours prior to a special meeting. You have to post the agenda to the website that the public body maintains or designates if one exists, and that requirement's eliminated for emergency meetings. And like I said before, you want to make sure that the agenda has sufficient information to put the public on notice of what it is you are planning to discuss. So the only real requirements are that the agenda designate a physical location where a member of the public can attend and participate in a meeting. If a quorum or more of members are attending remotely, but the Secretary of State's recommendation, which is what I just said, is in keeping with the law's intent. An agenda should allow interested members of the public to be reasonably informed about what specific topics will be discussed and what actions may be taken at the meeting. So if it's something that's going to appear on your minutes, and it's something that you're planning to have an open discussion about, and it's something you're planning to maybe take a vote on, that would be all things that should be on the agenda. And then, of course, you would also have your normal agenda items that appear for every single meeting. And if the public body wishes to add or delete an item from an agenda after it has been posted, it may only do so as the first act of business at the meeting. And again, this is a notice issue, so that if somebody plans to come to the meeting, they sort of have a sense of where something is on the agenda. They should tune in at the beginning of the meeting to see if it's been moved around, because if they're planning to come for the latter half of the meeting because the items later in the agenda, they've got an errand to do or whatever, they're gonna come back for it, they need to have some notice that the item's going to be moved up so that they don't miss it. And the Secretary of State's recommendation, which is, of course, the more conservative recommendation, is last-minute agenda items, especially those requiring board action, be added at meeting only in an emergency, which makes sense for all the reasons that I've outlined. Meeting minutes. So public bodies must take minutes of their meetings. And minutes are the permanent record of the formal actions of the public body, so you want to take care that they are accurate and complete. And the open meeting law requires that minutes give a true indication of the business of the meeting, covering all topics that arise. At a minimum, they must include the names of all members of the public body who are present, the names of all other active participants. That's why we ask people to identify themselves before they speak at a public meeting. All motions, proposals, and resolutions made and their dispositions, and the result of all votes with the record of individual votes if roll call is taken. As you can see from this list, it doesn't mean you have to write down every sentence that is uttered at a public meeting. That would be really difficult to do for the secretary and whoever is responsible that day for note-taking. So you just have to make sure that your minutes crystallize what the business was at the meeting, not every sentence that was uttered. So there are exceptions to the open meeting law when a public body can meet privately. These exceptions are unlikely to arise, or at least the deliberative session that I'm going to cover is unlikely to arise with this body, because a deliberation involves a quasi-judicial proceeding, which this board does not engage in. Quasi-judicial proceedings is a case in which the legal rights of a party are adjudicated, conducted so that all parties may present evidence and cross-examine witnesses, and resulting in an appealable written decision. So that's really a hearing where people are presenting and have a right to present evidence and cross-examine. So that will never come up, but it's just good to know what the exceptions are. And in the case of deliberations, the actual deliberative session is maybe private, but the final written decision, of course, must be made public at the end of that deliberation. And then there's the matter of executive session. So to enter executive session means a meeting where it's just the board members or possibly some advisors, very limited in scope of who can attend an executive session. And if you invite somebody who's really not authorized to be in an executive session into an executive session, you create a problem, because now you've got something that doesn't qualify as an executive session. A motion has to be made in open session to indicate the reason for going into executive session. And there is a statute that sets forth all of the reasons, all the permissible reasons for entering executive session, and that's in 1 VSA section 313. So the people who can attend an executive session are legal counsel, staff, clerical assistants, and persons who are subject of the discussion of, or whose information is needed. That usually arises in a personnel kind of situation where you might need to call somebody in to talk about human resources type things. But if you needed legal advice, that's allowed. If you know, and there are, like I said, I don't think it's worthwhile to go through all of the permissible reasons you can enter executive session. If you ever have a question about an executive session, you can consult that statute, and the list is pretty clear. Once in executive session, the board may not take any formal action, except for actions relating to securing a real estate purchase option, which I don't think is going to come up. In all other instances, you can have your discussion in executive session, and then you exit the executive session, and then you take your vote in the open session, if there is action required. Sometimes there is no action required. Oh, I included the list, so here we go. So these are again, I don't think that we really need to go through each one of these, but this is the statutory list that is that provides for an avenue to open an executive session. Most likely, the only one that would ever come up for CPARB is confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing legal services. And even that seems like it would be a very rare event. I'll just leave this up for a second because these are the other reasons for entering an executive session. And the important thing to remember is if you are entering an executive session, you must state the exact reason why you need to enter the executive session, and you must have make a finding that premature disclosure would result in substantial disadvantage to the body. So you have to have a good reason. Let me summarize it that way. And it needs to clearly fall within one of the statutory provisions. Okay, so say you do have a problem and you accidentally violated the open meeting law and somebody calls your attention to that. What do you do? If you agree that it's a violation of the open meeting law, you have 14 calendar days to cure it. So to cure it, you must either ratify or declare null and void any action that was taken at or resulted from a meeting that was improperly noticed, a meeting that a person or the public was wrongfully excluded from attending, or an executive session or a portion of an executive session that was not authorized by statute. And then the public body must adopt specific measures that actually prevent future violations. So what that means is you say, oh yeah, okay, we messed up, we shouldn't have done X. We're going to cure it by basically revoting, ratifying the earlier decision that you made or the earlier action that was taken. And then you have to do a little self-reflection and see what went wrong and come up with a way that you're going to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And sometimes that's as simple as creating a handout for everybody to better understand what went wrong. It depends on the level of the response and the specific measure to prevent a future violation can be commensurate to what the actual violation was. You don't have to go crazy if it was really a minor thing and can be readily cured. So what happens if you have a violation and you don't take the corrective steps that you need to take? You can be found guilty of a misdemeanor and fined up to $500. That's if you are a member of a public body and you knowingly and intentionally violate the provisions of the open meeting law. Or a person who, on behalf or at the behest of a member of a public body, knowingly and intentionally violates the provisions of the open meeting law. Or a person who knowingly and intentionally participates in the wrongful exclusion of any person or persons from any meeting. Courts may also grant injunctive relief, declaratory judgment, and attorney's fees. So that means that they can order you to not do it again. And they can impose the expense of the wronged party, if they have to go to those lengths, upon the public body. Okay, that was quick, and I would open it up to questions. I imagine there may be some. And I should also say that if you have questions about this in the future, first of all, I could make this slideshow available, but second, there is a ton of guidance through the Secretary of State and the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. If you just have a question about the open meeting law and you don't want to crack open a statute and try to figure that out, if you Google Vermont open meeting law, you'll find tons of reading material on it, and all of it is pretty easy to understand because it is intended to be written for folks who are serving on boards who don't necessarily want to read a statute. It's intended to be understandable because the goal here is to make sure that people are keeping meetings open and not violating the law. So it's not meant to be tricky.
Can you send me the presentation?
Sure.
So I can get it.
Yeah, happy to.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with taking attendance. So even the people that aren't speaking in the audience, no.
No, you don't have to take, you can.
Okay.
So that's a good question. You don't need to take people's attendance who are just present. You should try to insist that people identify themselves if they want to make a statement. Although I think if somebody said, I don't want to,
Okay.
you're not going to force them to, and you're still going to let them speak. But the only time you would really need to insist that every participant sign in is if there was some appealable thing that might happen where their attendance actually determines if they're allowed to take an appeal. That's not going to come up in this scenario. Anything else?
On the Select Board, we frequently get emails that are addressed from people, members of the public, that are sent to all of us. Now, if we all were to respond to that email,
If you all what?
if we were all to respond to that email, could that be considered a chain?
Yeah, it should be responded to that way. I think the best response to something like that is if you would like to bring this as a topic of discussion during public comment at our next meeting, this is the time and place, and keep it as simple as that. It would be a bad idea for a board to engage in a substantive conversation. And I know it's tempting because it's a member of the public, it's somebody you serve and you want to satisfy their question. If it's purely an administrative question, fine to respond, but if it relates to the business of that body, just give them the appropriate time and place to show up and leave it at that. I know it seems inefficient, but it really is important to address everybody at an open meeting rather than try to answer people individually. That's also how wires get crossed. And, it's a game of telephone. Anything else? Oh.
Push, okay. I have a follow-up question on that. If someone is then unable to attend, physically unable to attend, can they fully participate in this, whatever board it is, via Zoom or something like that?
A lot of times people will request a remote accommodation.
Okay.
Especially post-COVID.
Sure.
People are pretty adept at providing that accommodation.
Okay.
And also sometimes people submit their questions in writing in advance, and the board can address it in an open meeting, and then the person can watch the meeting later.
All right. Thank you.
Public access. Or they can look at minutes.
Okay.
So,
Thanks.
lots of ways to participate. I'm sure you're all thrilled that you got to have that presentation. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Always a pleasure to come before this board.
Yep. Thank you, Meryl.
Thank you, Meryl.
It's a stress relief. Oh, is that what it's called?
All right. So next on the agenda, and I apologize for being late, I got stuck in construction traffic on the way back to town. So next on the agenda, well, first of all, let me congratulate our 3 new members, because now that they have had open meeting law training, they are officially seated on Bennington's Community Policing Advisory Review Board, so yay. All right. So next on our agenda is the International Association of Chiefs of Police, IACP, recommendation summary that was completed by the town, for the town by the communications coordinator. So this is the first time that the board is fully seated, and what I would like to do, I guess I have to get a motion to discuss. Nope, okay. I still get confused on this, you'll find that out. I would like to just discuss it briefly and then make this a bulk of the November agenda to go through it in detail with some of the policies and procedures and the notes. So does this, I should probably say that this report has been posted on the town website for probably about a month or so now. So if anybody has any questions about it, it is available with the actual report that was done a couple of years ago by the International Association of the Chiefs of Police. So when we look at the report, there were actually 25 recommendations, and there were also 9 other tasks, so it was a total of 33. I may not have read that right. And they note that the following 6 statements regarding the release of this information. Number 1, the IACP report gave us valuable insight on how we can improve community policing in our town. We have taken these recommendations seriously and have been actively working on them since the report came out. Number 2, while we have implemented the majority of tasks, this does not mean we are done with this work. In many cases, the tasks are stepping off points for ongoing efforts. Number 3, we welcome input on actions we have taken to get to this point. If there are additional things we can do to address any recommendations beyond what we have done so far, we would love to hear it. There is always more that we can do. Number 4, this is a milestone in our work towards building trust between the community and the police by acting on the IACP recommendations, but it's only the start of our journey towards implementing the kind of community policing that our residents want. A lot of work remains to be done, and we welcome the ongoing conversation with all members of the community on how we can best get there together. Number 5, we thank the community members, town leaders, and our police department for their tireless efforts over the past 3 years to get this work done. This represents literally hundreds of hours of work done by dozens of residents working with town staff and our police department to achieve. Jonah, I'm really sorry, but I only find 5.
Well, actually, you're reading an older version.
Oh.
The latest version is the one that's on the website, and it does not reference 6 because in fact there are only 5.
Okay, so
it's just because that's an older version than was written before.
my apologies, I pulled this last week, or probably last month, so. I want to know if anyone on the board has any questions or any comments on this so far, anything that you would like to discuss?
Kelly, will we go through this piece by piece at the next meeting? Okay, because I have a number of questions about different items.
But it's okay to bring questions up now. I just really I was hoping to be able to introduce this because I didn't know how long we were going to have for open meeting, and you're now officially seated on the board.
Okay.
So now we can talk about things and discuss it, and I was hoping that we could get some more detailed conversation in November and really spend a lot of time on it. But I didn't know if anybody had any 30,000-foot view questions or any comments that they wanted. So Kate, if you have some questions on it, I think it's
I do. I don't want to be so picky about the question. So the biggest one that I had is when we talk about, and this is in number 19 in terms of the recommendations, when we talk about the root causes of any disorder, it's at the very bottom of the page. Do we use a community health model with the social determinants of health? Is that what you're focusing in on in terms of root causes? And for that we're really talking about issues of housing, food access, access to mental health care, access to substance abuse care, et cetera, health, general physical health. And I'm just wondering, is that where we're going to go with this issue of the root cause? Because it says we're supposed to identify the root causes of the disorder, and I just want to know what kind of model we're going to use for that.
That I can't begin to even answer. I have to
Okay.
be honest with you. I'm not sure what model they used,
Okay.
but we can find out. And we
Sure.
can, Tom, do you know?
Actually, I think what the most useful things we can bring out of this conversation are what experts we need to bring in for next month's meetings so that we have people here that can answer the questions with some authority.
Thank you.
And
Thank
we
you.
will have,
Sure.
the chief will be here next
Sure.
month. So.
The other thing that I wondered about is we had, and this is in number 6, the rest of them I can hold off on if you'd like. It talks about greater skill and in terms of using volunteers. This is in that area. And we're really talking about accessing skill sets from volunteers around victim assistance advocacy. And I wondered if, it says that it's ongoing, and it's due to, some of it has to do with security issues, obviously. Confidentiality is probably a huge one, but I wondered if any of those programs had been set up yet. Yeah.
That would be a question for the chief, but I do
Okay.
believe that there is a victim's advocate that they have put on the staff
Okay.
within the last year.
Okay.
And she is full-time there. And we'll definitely get him in for more of the specific questions on that.
Thank you so much.
Oh, Jonah?
Great to hear these questions. Thank you so much. So in reference to number 6, it really is specific to volunteer opportunities, so I'm not sure that a victim's advocate that's been hired by the police department would be an example of that. But really what they're looking for is like, how can the community be actively involved in the work of the police department? And you did reference an important thing, which is by state law, they are limited in who they are allowed to enter the building beyond the lobby. And in order to enter beyond the lobby, you literally have to go through a series of background checks. You have to take a course. So it's very difficult to have volunteers on that side of things. But keep in mind that there's many volunteer opportunities that aren't in the building, whether it's events like National Night Out or the incredible effort that the community did working on the policing policies. That involved over 40 volunteers from the community with dozens and dozens of hours each to review, recommend, and then revise police policies. So while it's true they can't be in the building, I think the police department has been doing as much as they can to try to include the community in volunteer efforts such as that. Yeah, great question. Thank you for that.
The only other question that I'm going to ask tonight, because we've got a slew of them, has to do with whether or not the communications coordinator position, and this is in number 9. Has that position been filled?
It's Jonah.
Oh, that's
Jonah.
you.
That one I can answer, yes.
You multiple hats? Is that what this is? All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So does anybody else have any questions or any comments on it?
And I apologize, I should clarify that I rated that as partially implemented. And the reason is because while we do now have a communications coordinator, and that is myself, it is not specifically to just be a community liaison for that purpose. So that's why I said partially implemented, because I felt that it was important that that we don't try to oversell what we're doing with that recommendation point. So, for example, I noted in the notes that in addition to providing support for the Safety and Equity Task Force, I also support the work of the CPARB, and it does include meeting with community stakeholders, but that is not the specific reason that I was hired. So there's a little crossover, so I did feel that it was important to call that partially implemented rather than implemented. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jonah. All right, so any other questions, comments? Any? No? Okay. So this will be on the agenda next month. The police chief will be here. He's much better to answer these questions than I am. And so if we can just come prepared for that, and that will be the bulk of the agenda in November. All right. Next up on our agenda is the topic of a community listening tour. One of the things that CPARB is charged with is outreach and getting out into the community. So I think it's time for us to do that. We had a listening session where we asked people to come to us. And now I'd like to discuss with the board the possibility of doing a community listening tour. And just to let everyone know where this came from, there was a story on Channel 3 a couple of weeks ago where the new president of Dartmouth College had gone around her campus and had done a listening tour with just very small informal groups. So I was thinking, why can't we do it? And I know we've had some not meeting violation conversations about that. So I would like to get it on the table and have the board members talk about their thoughts on it, and if it's something that we think is a good idea, then perhaps we could ask the outreach committee to come back with a couple of possible locations and dates for the November meeting for the board to talk about and see what we can do. And these will be, my thought was they would be smaller informal groups. They wouldn't be big, like the full board, so that we could actually do more in small groups of 2 and 3 as long as we don't break quorum. So that's what I was thinking about. I think I have to have a motion to discuss. Do we need a?
Tom, we don't need them. Oh, do we need them?
Okay. So, Kate, any?
Oh.
Okay, yep.
Okay.
I don't know if we need, but, so, okay. So, thoughts from the board members on this? Lindsay?
I think that we definitely need to have discussion about where we want to target listening sessions that will be comfortable for certain groups. Also, because it's not a full board, I know that perhaps there would be less comfort if people needed to be recorded or something during listening sessions. So I think it is a good idea to keep it to 1 or 2 or 3 board members.
Vicki? Okay.
Have we ever had meetings in the community, or has the residents always come to the board?
We only had one listening session.
Okay.
We haven't done any other community forums. We had talked about doing a couple, but they did not, one got canceled that we were going to kind of piggyback off of, and the other one we haven't done yet, and we're talking now about that.
Yeah, no, well, all I meant was, all I was asking was, have we ever gone out? So we've never done that before?
Not as a full board, but some of us have gone out. Some of us have gone to National Night Out, we've gone to Mayfest.
Okay.
We've gone to some other forums around, but nothing officially where we've gone and put up a little flyer and said, hey, we're going to be in your community room, come and talk to us informally.
Okay. So we've never gone to something like Bennington Elementary School and done that. Okay, so then that's, I think, so then it's about how many do we want to have? How many are proposing, and what's the time frame?
And I think that that's something that the outreach committee should get together on and come back with a proposal for us to talk about and say, well, you know what? We think that we should start with 3 and then add if it goes. We've reached out to a couple of community partners. This one said yes, that one said no. This one said maybe after, the holidays or something like that. But I think at least to come back with a couple of locations maybe, some, possible dates to look at or,
Can I ask, who was highly represented at the previous listening session that we had? Were there particular parts of the community that you felt really showed up for that?
There were probably about 25 people here. As far as diversity throughout the community, not much. At the time, there was the clearing of People's Rotary Park had happened. That happened to be the main topic. A lot of mental health things, but yeah. Am I missing anything?
No, I guess I had a question. Would this be something that would be ongoing, basically forever? And then if so, should we do a certain cadence that, we do it either every month, every 3 months? Or is it something we want to do a lot of quickly and then maybe redo it again at a later date? I don't know.
I think that's all up for discussion to see if it's, if it's something.
I would think that if we do a couple and they work out, we're getting some good involvement, then we just keep going. If we do 5 and we talk to 20 people total, then, we should just take a step back, look at what we're doing, how do we change it, and then, modify what we're doing and go forward again. But I think if we find something, I think coming to the firehouse, you're coming up to the 3rd floor, you've got a TV camera here, you've got all these tables, all these chairs.
It's intimidating.
A bit overwhelming. And some people just don't want to do that. But if we go and we find locations where people are comfortable, we go to a location they're comfortable with, I think we'll find, without the TV cameras, without the full board, that we might get a little bit more involvement. People will speak a little more freely, be a little more comfortable in their own surroundings. And I think something like that would work. I know I would be much more comfortable at a place that I go to, like here, regularly. And so, yeah, I think we should schedule a couple, see how it goes, and then kind of step back and reassess what we've done, decide if we modify things or if we just keep going with the structure that we laid out to begin with.
I have 2 questions. My first one is, you were discussing the outreach committee. I just want to make sure that, I want to know just a composition. Do we know what that is? Do we need a motion to approve any new members? Because I know we have.
No, I think we're good. The outreach committee is Vicki.
And me, yeah. I knew I was on there. Yeah, I never left.
And Kate and Lindsay are going to be research committee.
Okay.
And communications committee, Scott and Jeff has not changed.
Okay.
So something that I've been thinking about, and I think it's really important that we continue with the community outreach and to help folks build their trust within us as a board. And I think doing a couple of meetings is selling ourselves short, because if you want to prove to your community that you're there for them, I think to say, okay, we're going to do 2, and then if nobody shows up, we're not going to do it again. I think that's backing out on our community a little bit.
I think if we do a couple, and then I think regardless of how many people come up, we should regroup every couple of, or probably after every one, and just say, you know, what went well, what didn't, what can we do differently? And I think that that's something that we should ask the people that come to the sessions as well. What did you like? What would you do differently? What would you think we could do differently next time to make it a little bit more welcoming?
So it's my understanding that the goal of the listening sessions right now is to get feedback from segments of the community that might not attend meetings or might not have attended the listening sessions before. So it comes to mind that we should have targeted listening sessions and then maybe have an ongoing, like, quarterly session that's held differently and open to the community. That might make more sense.
Yeah, I can see that having something that moves from various locations around Bennington, draws different populations, different interests. And so if it's more routine and systematic, maybe it's every other month, we just have to see how that works. But it's, you know, in that context, we can bring people together, we can make sure that they understand what we're doing, but also listen to, because it's a listening tour, right? Listen to what their concerns are. Because they're going to be different in every area of town. Some areas have more homeless, some areas have more drugs, some areas have higher concerns around food scarcity that creates a concern around shoplifting or whatever, right? So we want to be able to move around town to do that. But I think it would be important for people to know when we're going to be in their space, so that they can depend on that rather than, but I agree, absolutely agree that after a few, we come back and we evaluate about, is this working for the people who are attending, and is it working for the board as well, so that we can inform the decisions and process that we have. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Any other comments? Okay, so if you and Vicki can just get together, come back with a list, and then next month we'll talk about where we want to be targeted, and if the other board members want to also, you know, come back and have some other suggestions when we come back next month, that would work too. Okay, all right. Upcoming agenda items. So next month will be, the bulk of the meeting will be the IACP summary report that Jonah did, and going through that. And hopefully that will help determine some projects and things that we'll want to work towards with there. Is there anyone else that wants to talk about any other agenda items? Lindsay, was there something you had? Media?
I'd like to add to the agenda approaching the media, specifically the banner, about the way that they're portraying crime in our area, the use of photographs and other pieces. I think the idea is that we want to approach them, though, with some research on the effect that sensationalizing crime reporting can have on a community. So I don't know if that's something that Vicki and I want to get together on and
You want to?
Yeah.
Yeah, work on that, and then we'll work on talking to the banner and seeing if they'll attend and come with us. Okay. Any other agenda?
Well, Vicki and I will probably report on outreach and just kind of what we want to do moving forward.
Yeah. Yep. And the survey and everything, we'll get that. Those are things. Okay. All right. Any announcements? I just want to remind everybody that the town survey is out, I hope. I missed that part. It was supposed to be, so sorry, I've been on the road. And just to remind everybody that we do have a comment section on our website, on our webpage for the town. So if there is a public comment and you're not comfortable coming to one of the meetings and being in front of the camera, please feel free to submit that. That comes directly to me. And that way we can help give you a voice. And then if not, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Thank you. Our next meeting will be November, can I get a second? Sorry. Second, okay. I forgot the date of our next meeting. I don't have a calendar. Do you have a calendar? Oh, all those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Ayes have it. Thank you.